I'm going to start this video by telling you that I do not actually believe that the current meta in Marvel Snap requires any crazy nerfs, buffs, or reworks. But as the name of this video suggests, I'm going to supply some to you because I think it's fun to speculate and talk about potential balance changes. We have a balance patch, well, not just a balance patch, it's few big things coming as well. Coming in the next couple of days, it's projected to come on the 31st of January here, and that's only like 2 or 3 days away. So we could see some balance changes. And in the past, Team Second Dinner has rolled out at least one balance change or patch a month. So we're due. But at least since about global release, they haven't actually drastically changed any cards during their balance change. It's just been like one power here, one power there, and the occasional energy change. So anyways, I'm kind of keeping that same ideology, and in the nerfs, I only have power decreases or energy increases, and then in the buffs, it's going to be the opposite, and then the reworks are going to be a little bit more drastic that maybe don't need to happen in the game, but just might make it a little bit healthier. I don't know, I'm stretching it, but I'm just trying to have fun here, so don't take these too seriously, okay guys? So in the nerfs, kicking it off, we have Iceman. I think Iceman is performing a little bit too good for the 1-drops, and maybe all the 1-drops in general need a lift instead of Iceman getting a nerf, but because Killmonger exists, they all die, so they have to have good value when they're played, and Iceman just happens to have the best, so he's thrown in a lot of decks. So I feel like it could be a little bit offset if you reduce just one power. He was just a 1/1, he'd still ice your opponent's hand, which is really the value that you're playing him for, and then the power offset is a little bit worse, so it doesn't feel as good as playing him at a location that you're actually trying to win. Maybe you got to strategically play him at a location you're trying to lose, but you still get that really good effect. So I feel like he'd still be played a whole bunch, just a slight nudge. Then you got Scorpion as well, 2/2. The thing about Scorpion, he whips your opponent's hand, and he has 2 power himself, but really if your opponent has like 4 or 5 cards in their hand, he's like a 2/7. It's kind of crazy. It's a bit too much value. Now, your opponent does have to play those cards, but let's face it, they brought that deck to the table because they planned on playing those cards. So you really just like ruined their day. And I know firsthand, I hate it when I get whipped with Scorpion. It sucks. It just feels like you're already on the back foot. This one, again, like it's a small change, you know. 1 power is probably the smallest change that can happen in Marvel Snap. So I still think Scorpion holds a lot of value in being played. And maybe it's not just an auto include when you need a 2-drop to just kind of fill your deck out. Instead, maybe you're actually trying to run this in a disruptive deck, and that's the archetype that you're going for, you know, instead of just all kinds of decks having Scorpion. It's a little bit much. And then, okay, Zabu. We got to talk about Zabu. It's a bit of an issue, right? So there's a few problems that I think are happening here with Zabu. Okay, so for one, him being a 3/2, you discount 2 4 costs, so that on curve on turn 4 you play those 2 4 costs, and then it's almost like Zabu costed like -1, like you saved 1 energy and Zabu is free. And then if it continues after that, you're just continuously getting insane value. In any card game, discounting the cost of a card is always an issue and going to create some insane combinations. I think we're seeing it a lot right now with Zabu like being so frequent. I feel like every second or third deck that I'm playing, Zabu happens to be there, and it's a little bit too much. Another issue I find with Zabu is that you can't really counter it. You're probably screaming at your monitor, oh, well, you just Enchantress, you just Rogue, and that's great, but it's kind of got that Sarah effect, that ongoing effect where you can, your opponent or whoever played it, right, can still get value because your opponent can't react in time, right? So you play Zabu on 3, then those cards are already discounted, I get to play them, and then my opponent can stop the Zabu by Enchantress or Rogue or whatever it is, right? But I've already gotten value, which with a card like this and like Sarah, it's just always going to be a thing, okay? So what I'm thinking is we bring it up to a 4 cost. That's a pretty heavy-handed nerf, I won't lie. Anytime something increases in energy without getting a power boost, it hurts. Like you could almost argue you could put Zabu up to 3 power if you're going to take this route. But I really feel like the discounting it just makes it good enough on its own right. Like I was saying earlier, you discount 2 4-drops, you play them on turn 4 after playing Zabu. It's like Zabu was a 0-2 with ongoing value unless your opponent can somehow stop it. And then if they're not able to stop it, it's just a little bit bonkers sometimes if you built the right deck. So I think it's a pretty reasonable nerf. The problem is it's a season pass card and we got to watch out for that. The other thing that I don't really love about Zabu and just a few other cards in Snap is that they really constrain the design space of the game. Anytime a future 4-cost card is going to be printed, we're always going to say, well, that could work in a Zabu deck. And that's kind of all right, but if that's like the longevity of Snap for the next year, that every time that happens, we say that statement, it's a little bit annoying. So I feel like it's a bit of an issue in that regard. So I feel like it has to really suffer for this insane bonkers effect, and 3 cost is just not enough in my opinion. I feel like it's got to go to 4, but that's just my opinion. Let's get to some buffs. All right, let's talk about some buffs. Now, I actually think that there's a few other cards that could be buffed, but I just really highlighted these 3. I think there's a few that people call out for that could use some buffs, and they are weak right now, but I think we're going to get future support that might bring them to life. We've kind of seen that in a very drastic way when Silver Surfer came out. Brood became extremely viable to the point that people are starting to call out for nerfs, which is kind of shocking to me, because not a lot of people played Brood before Silver Surfer existed. It kind of worked in Patriot decks, but there was always kind of better options. So anyways, a card like Black Bolt, I don't feel like needs a buff because there's a card like Stature that's coming out that they kind of work together. We don't know when Stature's going to come out, and she might be changed prior to release, but currently the data mine version shows that they synergize together. And if you don't know what that card does, I've done a bunch of data mine reviews that you can check out, or just head over to snap.fan. They got it there. So anyways, here's 3 that I feel like just aren't pulling their own weight and could use small little nudges. So we got Rhino. I really feel like Rhino should use a buff. He's a 3 cost at 3 power, and he's still not good enough to make the cut in Silver Surfer decks. He's one of the cards I never really see in any lists. The only list that I've seen him in is when somebody tried to make an all Spider-Man villain deck. So it's not even like you're running the card for its ability. And the ability isn't that bad. Ruin a location is actually legit. There's a few other cards that kind of do that, and they ended up, making the cut over Rhino, aka like Scarlet Witch will make the cut more frequently because she's cheaper. So why don't we just, Scarlet Witch is a 2-3. Why don't we make Rhino a 3-4? Why not, right? And if you think it doesn't work because Cyclops is a 3-4, that's just not how Snap works. No abilities get buffs from Patriot. So that's a totally separate thing from Rhino being a 3-4 with an ability. And it's not even an on reveal that you could trigger multiple times. So it's just like, unless you beast him back to the hand and then play him elsewhere, that'd be kind of cool. But for the most part, you're just getting rid of one location that you don't want to see on the board, which might even help your opponent as well. And he's a 3-4. So, and really, that doesn't even end up seeing more play unless maybe Silver Surfer decks start to tech it in case there's like Onslaught Citadel greatly benefiting your opponent or something that's just nasty, right? So I feel like 1 power increase would be reasonable for Rhino. Vision is another one that I feel like could get a little bit of a power increase. And honestly, I already like Vision the way he is. Like I like to make it work in like Lockjaw decks. It's great because if you end up getting Vision off of the Lockjaw cycle, you can move it off, opening a space for Lockjaw again. But for the most part, I feel like it feels a little bit bad in that you can only really move this card once unless you cheat it out early. And this power increase doesn't change anything about that, but it does help that if you do move it, you can maybe win that location that you move it to a little bit more than you could before. Because ultimately, I really like his effect. And maybe the way I would also change this is to decrease his energy cost to maybe 4, but then drastically change the power to maybe even honestly like a 4-4. Because just being able to move multiple times is great for move decks. And then like not giving your opponent the know where you're going to put that power is kind of strong as well. So maybe that'd be a better course of action. But I thought maybe we'll just increase it by 1 power and see how it works. Because again, I think it's totally fine if Team Second Editor decides to nerf or buff a card like some way that they want to, and then revert it a month later. They did it a lot in beta, so they haven't done it since the release. Maybe that triggers people or whatever, but it's not like you're getting refunded for any changes. So why not kind of like push and pull on the cards to find the sweet spot or how the community feels about a card? So I feel like that's something you can do with Vision. You just give them one more power, and if that's not really doing it, or if it's not the change they wanted, then you can reduce the energy cost and reduce the power accordingly. All right, and another one I have here is Dagger. I have Dagger here because out of all the move cards, she ends up not making the list in most scenarios. You usually tech in like Torch and Vulture or Multiple Man well before you put in Dagger, and she can get to some pretty cool power totals, but it really does rely on what your opponent is playing on the other side of the board. Unless you're trying to flood the board with stuff, with Green Goblin and whatnot, that can be decent, but for the most part, she falls a bit flat and not very consistent. So there's just too much going on, right? You gotta hope that they have stuff on the other side, and you gotta move her. So instead of being just a 2-1, why don't we make her a 2-2 and see if that helps? Then if she moves and there's like 2 other cards on the other side, she's going to be a 2-6, and that's great value. Even better, she can get up to a 2-10. So yeah, just like a little bit of a power change, I feel like could really make a big difference for this card. And it wouldn't hurt to help out the move decks a little bit more, right? Give them more options to play with. So that's kind of what I wanted to do here, because there's a few that you can't really change. Like I don't feel like you can change Torch or Vulture, so kind of leave those the same. I mean, really what they need is more cards added as options. But if we're not getting any anytime soon, then why don't we just buff the ones that we have a little bit, and then maybe you can pull it back if move somehow gets crazy later down the line. Anyways, now let's get to the crazy reworks. All right, so here are 3 reworks that I have. Now, anytime it's a rework, I'm just classifying it as it has text change. That's kind of how I'm doing these types of videos. So the first one I have is Quake. Quake never sees any play. She can be really fun though. Like we've had some awesome moments on stream. And I was thinking, what if she just didn't have that condition? I think that's the biggest downside to Quake is you don't actually get to be consistent with this effect. And there's a lot that happens here. So I reduced her power because I think shuffling locations is a big deal, and it shouldn't be done so freely. So drop down 1 power, but then don't have the restriction. Now, there is implications to this. If there is no restriction, then you can't just play Quake for free at the other location if you like the position of the locations, right? Now, every time you play Quake, the locations are going to swap around unless there's Cosmo down the line, right? So that could be actually a downside. But I think for the most part, if you choose to play Quake, then you want to shuffle the locations and then you tech her into the deck just as that potential option. So maybe her power could stay the same. I just feel like that's a very powerful effect, and that's why the condition existed in the first place. But it'd be fun to take away the condition, drop her power down, and see what happens. Silver Surfer. Okay, this is probably going to be the most controversial one because I went pretty drastic with the change here. And really only did it because I've seen so many suggested changes, and you know, I don't know if there's a happy place for Silver Surfer, unfortunately. But you got to admit, it's everywhere, dude. If I'm not playing a Zabu deck, I'm playing against a Silver Surfer deck. And maybe it's because they're the season pass cards, so a lot of people had access to it without, you know, dishing out crazy amounts of money. But it is just showing up way too frequently on ladder, and I feel like there needs to be a change. Now, I previously suggested that this card should go to -1 power because that was the most, you know, simple change that could be made. But a lot of people, rightfully so, made the argument that it doesn't really do enough because, you know, you want to win the other locations. You play Surfer at the location that you don't want to win, which is true in most case scenarios, right? So I went a little bit crazy, maybe too crazy. But I was like, you know, everybody loves the fact that he's got the 3s with the 3s and the 3s. So let's put even more 3s in there. Let's give his on reveal, give 3 other 3-cost cards plus 3 power. Now we're theming hard here, right? But I don't know if this is balanced, but the way I came to the conclusion here, the way I was thinking about it is, 1, it doesn't work in negative Surfer, which I don't know if is too much of a problem, but you know, that's a thing. 2, you only give 3 power to 3 other cards. That is the equivalent of 9 power. So if it hits all 3 other cards, then you're looking at a 312. That is still absolutely insane. And you can be pretty consistent with that, still doing the Sarah thing, still playing 3 cards on turn 6, and then you just get insane power totals from there. Like right now with Surfer having 0 power, dishes out like at least like 15, or like just crazy power totals, right? So I feel like this is almost going to be the same, but a little bit more conditional, because you do have to set it up. You got to get at least 3 out there, and then it's random. Let's say you got more than 3 out there. You played Brood and Storm and Juggernaut or whatever else. Okay, you got 5 out there. Well, you don't actually know which ones are going to hit. It's a little less consistent. And then another thing I was thinking with, you combo this with Wong, it still gets out crazy power totals, but again, it's random. It's kind of like Ironheart. It becomes essentially Ironheart that's a little bit restricted, but gives out more power. That's really what's going on. And maybe it's too similar to Ironheart, but we see similar cards in Marvel Snap all the time. And this is still essentially different, right? Ironheart can hit any cards. So that's a great benefit to Ironheart, but she doesn't have 3 power. She's 0. Whereas, Silver Surfer has to hit 3 cost card. But he's going to give 3 power, but he's got 3 power himself. So it's there's like give and take on both those effects, despite them being fairly similar. I don't know if this is the right way. I just felt like it ticked a few of those boxes that people are not too happy with. So maybe this is like the way to go, or something similar to this, or we just go 1 less power, or we don't touch Silver Surfer. Here's the thing I want to make pretty clear. I don't actually think the card is too insane. It is counterable. It is foreseeable. You can tell when somebody's going to Silver Surfer you, so you can retreat on a timely fashion and then not lose too many cubes. What I don't like about the card is how rampant it is on the meta. It's everywhere right now. And I just feel like from a fun standpoint, and just like not always, just playing against Silver Surfer decks like 50% of your games, I feel like it should have a little bit of a change, because people are running the deck because it's good. The card is good. The deck is good. If you're retreating every time, your opponent's getting at least 1 or 2 cubes. So they're cubing up and you're cubing down. It's not like you got off scot-free. Like you're costing you your cubes to retreat. So anyways, I feel like there should be some kind of change. We're 2 months removed from it being the season pass card. So yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about Silver Surfer. And then the last one I got here is Baron Mordo. I feel like this is such an easy setup. Like this is such a great way to change this card. On reveal, your opponent draws a card and reveals to you, set its cost to 6. So basically it's the exact same effect, but when the card is drawn, you get to see what it is. Because the worst thing about Baron Mordo isn't the effect. The effect is actually pretty legit. But you will never know, even up until the point that the game is done and then you're queuing into your next game, you will never know what card you hit unless they play it. And if you hit a pretty good one, they're probably not going to play it. If you hit a bad one like Death or something like that, then, well, that sucks. So I feel like it'd be cool if you could see the card. And then maybe people would actually play Baron Mordo. Or maybe they wouldn't, and it would just be like proof that the effect isn't that great. So anyways, I thought that would be an interesting change. But anyways, I thought that would be pretty cool. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think about maybe some balance changes that I haven't mentioned here that you would like to see. Let me know in the comments below. We do have that patch coming around the corner, so there are surely going to be some changes. And honestly, they're pretty random with it. The last patch, I didn't predict many of those. Pretty random with like the hazmat changes and whatever else. But hey, they got the data. They know what they're doing, and I trust the team. I just like to have fun and speculate about some possible changes. So there you go. All right. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.